All right, welcome back to the TCI studios. Been a little while, Will.
Been a long while. I can't even remember the last time.
We're going to crank up the studio now the football season's over, give you guys some more insight or opinions and all kinds of good stuff here. You're going to see a series of videos coming out from us. We got our digital editor, Mr. Boatwright, back there taking care of everything for us. So if it doesn't come out perfect, you know who to blame. Obviously, a lot happened. Season didn't quite end the way Clemson fans wanted to, but there's been a lot of news since the season ended, and we're going to take in this first video we're going to roll out. We're going to talk about some of the things that's happened since the season, all of that related to guys coming and going, and overall, obviously, some good news on the front for as we look forward to next season. Will, you want to, I guess, let me ask you first off, who do you think is we've had a lot of players announced they're coming back. Who is the most important announcement?
Without a doubt, it's Justyn Ross at wide receiver. When you look at last year and you looked at where Clemson struggled on offense, I think they were missing that big-time playmaker. Nothing against Amari Rodgers, who had an outstanding all-ACC season. Nothing against Cornell Powell, who also, did great and had an all-ACC caliber season. But teams loaded up the box to stop Clemson's running game because they just didn't feel like they had to worry about the vertical passing game. And that was a major issue all season for the Tigers. And I think now, as they look ahead now to next season, having a guy like Justyn Ross, the way he can stretch the field, the way you can use him in different styles and different ways to kind of put pressure on the defense on the outside, that's going to help Clemson ultimately in running the football, I think, Robert. And I think that's why it's a big deal. Yeah,
I think that's a huge announcement. We kind of knew that one was coming a little bit, and obviously just glad to have it come out officially. Obviously, the best news is for Justyn personally that he's going to be able to get cleared and come back and play football. Obviously, around that there were questions of can he play football again, and then if he can, is he going to go to the NFL? Is he going to come back to Clemson? We haven't got the official word that everything's cleared and that he'll definitely be back, but based on what Dabo told us the last time he talked about it back in December, he said, everything was looking real good. Mm-hmm. Justyn had to go back for one more doctor visit in January, but they expected that the outcome was going to be positive. He had been doing everything in practice except for doing contact.
Yeah, exactly. And, like you said, we don't know officially what the verdict is, but I would imagine with Justyn Ross coming out and making the announcement the way he did on social media, the way Clemson announced it, it tells me that he got some good news from the folks up at Pittsburgh that did the surgery. I love hearing Dabo say Dr. Ukwakwa or whatever his name is.
Come on, Will.
I can't even say it. I love for Dabo to say it though when he's on the teleconferences and stuff with us. But yeah, it was. You would imagine, Robert, those guys that he's fine though with the spinal cord injury, and and that he's going to be able to do everything he wants to do and play football safely. And I think Clemson did it the right way. I love the way they first started him off just with helmets and shoulder pads to kind of just let him get back out there and get a feel catching the football and the kinds of things like that. And then after that, they allowed him to put the pads on and just kind of work in a way where he at least did all the individual drill work and things of that nature. He didn't do any hitting or anything like that. And I would imagine that's probably what they're going to do in spring ball too. I just, that's what they did with Mike Williams. Yeah, you just you just didn't need to really put him in harm's way at that point. So I'd imagine they're probably going to do the same thing and kind of ease him into getting hit once they get into fall camp.
All right, so that's the biggest news. There's also a lot of good news on the other side of the football. And on that side, we don't have one player coming back, but we have 4 big announcements of players that decided to come back. Will, you want to run through those players and some thoughts on high level what you think that means?
Yeah, number one, the first guy was James Skalski. He used a new NCAA rule that allowed seniors or actually anybody, to be honest with you, to come back or to get that extra year of eligibility without it punishing the team this year on far scholarship limits. So that was huge. He took advantage of that situation. And then Derion Kendrick a week later announced he was going to come back to Clemson, I should say 4 days later, announced he was coming back when I think all of us on TCI staff, we thought he was gone, and I'm sure a lot of other people did too.
I think a lot of people thought he wanted to go, but I think after the Sugar Bowl, a lot of people felt like he probably should come back.
Right. So he decided to come back. I think that was a good decision on his part. And now, you get an all-ACC caliber player back at corner. You got an all-ACC caliber player back at linebacker. And then you get an All-American back at safety in Nolan Turner, who was a second-team USA Today All-American. So he's back in the fold as he decided to do the same thing James Skalski did and take advantage of that extra year. And then I think the biggest news of all of those was the one of getting Thomas back, Xavier Thomas.
You think that's bigger than the others?
I do, because when he did play this year, and I talked to you about this, he was so productive. And when he finally did get on the field this year, now he was only played in 5 games, only took 119 snaps, but he had four tackles for a loss and 3.5 sacks and a forced fumble during that time that he played, that brief time that he played. You can imagine if you throw a whole season and the numbers he put up. The numbers he put up were equal to KJ Henry, who played the whole season. That's how productive he was and what he was doing at defensive end. And so getting him back, and then you throw in everybody else you got on that defensive line, and Tyler Davis and Brian Brzee, KJ Henry, Justin Maskell, and let's don't forget about Justin Foster coming back also. You just got this massive amount of talent and depth on the defensive line. And don't forget about guys who didn't play last year that redshirted. A couple of those young guys that are going to come in and had another year had that year of getting stronger and things of that nature and getting better acclimated to the system. This defensive line is very talented. DeMonte Capar comes to mind. This defensive line is very talented and deep, and we'll talk about it, but I think it's got a chance to be one of the best defensive lines I've ever had.
Capar did play, just to be clear, but he didn't play much.
Correct.
All those guys played some, just especially with the rule. But you're right. I mean, those guys weren't major contributors this year, so will be great to get those guys back. So obviously there on the defense, you've got a major change with all of those announcements and all those guys coming back. And Xavier Thomas, just his upside is huge. We've never seen him hit that mark that everybody thought he would hit. As Will said, he had really good stats per snap this year, and he was doing all that not being in 100% football shape. Exactly. That was, early in the year we thought he might just opt out of the season because of the COVID side effects he had to go through, but he did struggle, go back through, work his way back into playing and put up some good numbers for the amount of snaps. There's one other guy that came back that announced he was coming back for that extra year eligibility, which also will have an impact on the team next year. Yeah,
and an impact on the defense, and that's Will Spires. We don't want to forget about him because Will actually had one of the best years in Clemson football history punting the football. His numbers were up there with Chris Gardaki's. If anybody who's old school Clemson remembers that name, Chris Gardaki was one of the all-time greatest kickers and punters in the history of the Atlantic Coast Conference. And he was putting up those kind of numbers, averaged over 44 yards a punt, over 40 yards net per punt. 17 punts were down inside the 20-yard line, and he had 20-something punts over 50 yards.
See, I was getting ready to say all those stats.
Yes, so he was. Will actually had a very good year, and when you have a defense that is as talented as Clemson's this year, if you can force every team to have to drive the ball 80 to 75 yards every time with that defense, it's going to be hard for teams to consistently move the football on Clemson next year.
All right, so that's kind of a recap of the guys that decided to come back, gave Clemson some good news since the Sugar Bowl. The numbers are great. It's not all at the same position like the Power Rangers, but they're impacting a lot more areas of the team. So the impact of these guys coming back could be even bigger than the Power Rangers who decided to come back, and we all know how that next season ended. We're going to get a lot more in depth on what these things mean to the offense and the defense and some other things as we give you guys some more videos here from the TCI studio, but stay tuned to the Clemson Insider for the most complete coverage of Clemson athletics and recruiting.